All right, good evening, everybody. The time is 6 p.m. Today is Tuesday, July 18, 2023, and we're here for a work session and budget workshop for the Coppell City Council. We do have a quorum present, so I'm calling the meeting to order. Item number 2 on our agenda is citizens' appearance. We do not have anybody signed up to speak. So I didn't think I was talking that loud, so I'm going to skip that one. What's that? And before we get into the agenda items for tonight, just a little reminder for everybody, we're right in the middle of budget season now. And this is the time that if you've got any adjustments or want to have discussions on adjusting the budget, now's the time to do it. We had a good session Thursday night on the charitable organizations, and we had no adjustments to the proposed budget. But that's the time to do it. So tonight, if you've got anything coming up tonight, please feel free to speak up. All right, item number 3 on the agenda is introduction of the general fund and debt service. Ms. Tien.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before I dive in to that portion, I wanted to let you know that you did receive an email just not too long ago that has the initial proposed budget in it. We did not purposely put that in your binder. We are handing it out tonight and sending it out tonight because we didn't want you to spend a lot of time in it, because property taxes aren't right. It doesn't take into consideration anything from the workshops. It simply is meeting our legal requirements. And we need you to have it so then we can post it to our website, okay? So I just wanted you to know why you just received that in your mailbox. So you do have it electronically, and we'll hand it out later. Jessica will talk a little bit more about it. So now, before I dive into the assessed valuations and the property tax rate and the general fund and debt service fund budgets, I did want to share some key points and considerations regarding the proposed budget. So the proposed budget is a balanced budget that maintains and enhances existing service levels. The budget is based on feedback received from council during the retreat in January. For example, the proposed budget does include the village coordinator position. It includes the food truck park. It enhances the Celebrate Coppell event. It provides business support, and it a position for the community information officer. It's also built around inflationary environment. There's uncertainty around property appraisals, and it includes the assumption that Rule 3.334 is in effect. It is also built on a 3.499% increase to the property tax revenue. And last, the proposed budgeted expenditures are 6.77% more than prior year. And that is after backing out the one-time transfers for both the Capital Replacement Fund and the Enterprise Solutions Replacement Fund. Those transfers were made to fully fund those two funds. We did that last year. We have a little bit more that we're adding this year, and that's the result of the impact of inflation, particularly inflation related to our public safety vehicles, and that's why the budget includes that additional amount to fully fund those two funds. And we'll talk a little bit, we'll talk more obviously about that when we get to the budget portion of the agenda. So now we're on to a presentation of the assessed valuations, and I've provided you an overview of the key points and considerations regarding the proposed 24 budget. So now we're going to take a look at the assessed values, which is on page 4 of your packet. And it's also on your screen, and there's a lot of information on this page and on the screen. And so if you'll focus on the columns under the 23 taxable value and the difference, and I have the numbers that we're going to be talking about circled in red on the screen. So So this is the 2023 preliminary certified values, taxable values, and this is as of May 25th. It shows that values are almost $11 billion. It shows that this is an increase in values of almost 1.4 billion, and it represents about a 14.29% increase over the prior year's certified values. So we're comparing certified values to preliminary values right now. Last year when we did this comparison, that increase was 15.81. And what's interesting is until last year, we've been doing this comparison, until last year, we hadn't seen this type of an increase since the 90s, and that's when Coppell was growing, and so a lot of the increase was related to new properties.
Question, Kim?
Yes, sir?
Where does the 10% tax cap flow into that?
Are you referring to the values can only increase on a homestead exemption 10% of the market value?
Right.
So, and that's only for your homestead. If it's a rental property or vacation property, there's not a limit, and at commercial property, there's currently not a limit. Only for your homestead.
So does this reflect that on the residential or not?
So, I don't know what it reflects right now, because the preliminary is just raw data, and that's what they're working on. They're working on abatements. They're getting the abatements added. Any protests. They're trying to incorporate those. So the May data that you're looking at, these values it's very raw data.
Oh, this came from May?
Yes.
Oh, never mind.
Yes. You
Okay.
won't get the certified values till next week. So that's why you see the very high increase of the 14.29. Last year, again, we started at 15% and ended up at 10%. So I would expect the certified values are going to be less, and we're going to talk more about that. Okay. Based on the preliminary tax values, commercial makes up currently, based on these preliminary values, 47% of the total value, and residential makes up 53%. Last year in May, it was the same breakout, 47%, 53%. However, when we received certified values, it was down to a 45-55% split, and that's pretty consistent with what we usually see when we get our certified values as far as the makeup of residential versus commercial. Okay. You see the last comment on this slide is, well, we already covered it. It's the 10%. I want to make sure I don't forget anything and the question that you asked. So next, this next slide is not in your packet. It's really just analyzing preliminary valuation, the growth rate. And so, again, in May, which was reflected on the previous screen, we were looking at, or we're seeing a 14.29% growth rate. This slide takes 30 years worth of data and says basically over the previous 30 years, the average adjustment between preliminary values and certified values was a decrease of almost 8%. Okay, so we adjusted downward, which makes sense because your preliminary values are basically raw data. There's no abatements in there. There's no protests haven't been included. And then we also look at what was, over those 30 years, what was the highest decline, and the highest decline was 11.64. So if we look at this, we would estimate that our growth would only be 0.99% if we use the highest decline. If we use the lowest decline, we would look at, that we would think that our growth rate would be about a little over 11%. And so this is just all the analysis that we look at. The information before you, the projections before you, use a 6% increase in property values. And so that's when you look at property tax revenue, when we start talking about the tax rate, it is considering values are going up at 6%. If you remember the seesaw effect, right? If values come up, grow more than the 6% that I'm protecting, then the tax rate that you're going to see, the actual tax rate that we, based on the certified values, would be less. If for some reason values come in less than the 6% that I'm proposing, then the tax rate that you'll see next week will be higher than the one you're seeing tonight. Okay, so that's that in a nutshell. Basically, tonight I'm providing you a guesstimate on everything related to property taxes. Okay. I did want to point out one other note that I had is that up until last year, the growth rate, it was actually declining. So certified values in 2018 grew at 8.44% over the previous year, and then in 2019 it only grew 5.99. In 2020 the growth was only 4.27, and then in 2021 it was 4.15. And then, of course, in 2022, it went up to 10.14. Okay? I just thought that was interesting to share with you. I don't want to go there yet. So, page 5 in your packet is going to show you the estimated tax rate based on the taxable value growing at 6%. And it's based on a 3.499% increase in the M&O property tax revenue. This page, the page in your packet also shows you the breakout between maintenance and operations, and then interest and sinking, or M&O and INS. And then page 6, so the next page is going to show you the no new revenue tax rate. So that would be the rate that would generate the same amount of maintenance and operations for fiscal year 24 that was generated in fiscal year 25 based on the properties that were in existence. And for this analysis, we're just assuming all the property right now was in existence. We know that we have some new property, but for this analysis, we're just doing it easy until we get the do the actual tax rate calculation.
Don?
Real quick, just to confirm, so on the page, top of page 5 and 6, the assessed valuation is 10.2 million. That does not tie back to page 4, but is that because you're assuming only a 6% growth in assessed value?
Correct. So
instead of the actual what you got from
correct.
the appraisal district in May. Okay,
Because
so this is the 6%.
It would just be unrealistic to use that value to calculate, to provide you with an estimate of a tax rate.
Thanks.
Because we know it's not going to be that.
Yeah. Okay.
And so what is going to be the estimate of the city's portion of a residential property tax bill based on average home values for a homestead, and then a property with a homestead plus a property with a homestead and over 65. And so this slide shows that the average residential tax bill for fiscal year 23, based on fiscal year 23's taxable property value and fiscal year 23's tax rate of 0.518731, compared to the estimated average residential property for fiscal year 25 or 24 preliminary taxable values using a 0.504461 property tax rate, which would then again generate an increase of 3.499%. That's shown on page 5 in your packet. Compares those two, so prior year to current year, and it uses the average taxable or assessed value in 23, and all I did was take that up 6% because I don't know the average value yet, so I just increased it by 6% to get a new average value, and now we're calculating what the tax bill would be for that property last year and comparing it to what it will be estimated for fiscal year 24. And you can see that for someone with a homestead exemption, the bill would increase about $72 for the year, and it's a monthly increase of about $6. And then if you go over for somebody who has an over 65 exemption and a homestead exemption, the difference is going to be about $86 or $7.20.
I was having trouble following your math here a little bit, so hang on just a second.
Okay.
Okay, so the one on the left is not senior exemption. The one on the right is senior exemption, and on both slides you're showing 2023 versus 2024.
Correct.
So why is the increase in the city portion for the over 65 and homestead higher than a homestead only?
The overall tax bill goes.
Huh?
The overall tax bill is lower.
You understand my question?
I understand your question, and I think it's the difference between, the tax is 4,500 here, 4,700 here, so I think the difference, it's not, it's math. I can't answer your question right now.
I know why it is. It's because you're not getting to take the 50446 out of the $100,000 exemption.
Continue.
Do you want to move on, or you want to stay?
Oh, I thought you were doing something. No, you're,
No.
Yeah,
No,
I
the
can't
math
find the
is
slide
working
right
out the
now.
way the math
Yeah.
is working, so.
okay, you can move on, sorry.
Okay.
I was waiting for you.
No, I think you answered what I would say. Okay, so next we're going to move on to page 7 and 8. And we're going to talk about the general fund, and we will start with the revenue of the general fund. I'm going to refer you to page 9 in your packet, because it's a picture for those who like pictures. And we make sure that the colors on the pie chart agree with the colors in the packet. Kevin.
I hear you.
Just giving you a hard time.
Oh, no, I got you.
Okay. So this shows that each revenue sources, it shows the percentage of total revenue. Each source of revenue is of total revenue of the general fund. As I talk about it, I'm going to be talking to you in percentages of increase over prior year or decrease from prior year. Okay? So what you're seeing here is just the percentage that each category is of total revenue. I'm going to talk about the change. Okay? And we're going to talk about property taxes, which is the blue piece of the pie. And again, it's budgeted based on the 3.499% rate that we've previously been talking about. And it represents about 63% of the total revenue, or about $43.6 million. The next is the red, which is sales tax, and it represents almost 19.5% of total revenues, or about $13.5 million. And we continue to budget as if the rule 3.334 is in effect. And so based on some additional analysis, and that we're still experiencing the impact of an inflationary environment on prices, we are budgeting this at a 5% increase over the adopted fiscal year 23 budget. Okay? So property taxes and sales taxes make up about 82.5% of total revenues of the general fund. The remaining 17.5% is from the other categories, which are charges for services, court fines, licenses and permits, franchise taxes, and then some miscellaneous other revenue.
Kim, how much did you, on the sales tax side, what was the dollar amount that was taken out from 3.334?
So we have been budgeting as if 55% we would lose and we would retain 45%.
So about 14 and a half?
For this fund?
Yeah, okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yes.
Mayor?
I'm sorry, Jim?
Is that what adopted 22-23 means? We're budgeting based on the rule being in effect?
And right, in 2023, we budgeted as if the rule was in effect, and we're
Right.
continuing that, so we're growing that about 5%.
Okay, but that's what the vernacular, the adopted means. We're budgeting as if the rule's in effect, and that's why it's different from the fiscal year budget as amended?
Correct, because the fiscal year budgeted amended, the rule hasn't went into effect, so I need to bring to you what we're actually receiving.
Got it.
So we budgeted 13 million, we think we're gonna get almost 25 million.
Gotcha, okay, thank you very much. That's, okay.
So for the charges for service category, we are seeing revenue from programs that are put on by the Community Experiences Department to move back to those pre-COVID levels. So summer camps, all the youth programs, all of that, we're starting to see those revenues come back. So we are projecting revenues based on an analysis and discussion with the Community Experience Department's leadership team. So those revenues are up a bit. And then I did also want to share that, as Jessica mentioned when she presented CRDC, we are not budgeting the 35% transfer from CRDC into the general fund. And that, we stopped that in 23, and we still aren't doing it in 24. And that's to help preserve the CRDC in case the rule does go into effect. Okay. So are there any questions on revenues? No?
So on the sales tax, I don't see the transfer out for the 3.334.
So we don't transfer it out, we just budget reduced.
Because this is just a budget. Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Yeah.
I was so used to seeing those negative numbers from Thursday, so I just had to ask.
Okay, next we're gonna cover expenditures. This first slide is not in your
Yeah.
packet.
Don has a question.
Oh.
Can I
I'm sorry.
ask a question? This may be, maybe for both of you, Mike and Kim, but, so I completely understand budgeting sales tax as if it's gonna be cut. However, it's not gonna get cut by October 1st this year, correct? I mean, the rule's not gonna go into effect October 1st of this year. I guess I'm trying to think through, you know what I'm saying?
As far as we understand, that is correct. The reason I say that is because we're getting ready to do a summary judgment.
Okay. But now,
I
as I
think
think
the ruling will happen before October 1st, Jim, or Brianna knows more, or Don knows more about timing.
So I guess it is possible, is what you're saying.
Anything with this thing is
Okay,
a
that answers my
possibility.
question.
And we know that the trial's in January, and while we may believe that, say we were to be successful, yay.
Yeah.
If we're not successful, we believe it would wait till October 1st of 24, 25. But there's nothing,
We just don't know.
we don't know because the way the rule's written.
It's a good chance we will come back and amend
And, you know.
once we figure out what's really coming in.
Right,
Okay, that's fine.
after January, I believe it'll be all the way through the trial, we'll find out what happens, and we'll be amending the budget because we'll be collecting the revenues.
Okay. But I didn't have a problem with doing it that way, the fact that we are almost on, I mean, chances are it's not gonna go into effect by October 1st, but
Right.
that's good. I'm good, thanks.
You're gonna decide your worst case scenario.
Right, worst case, yeah,
Well, we count our chickens.
right.
Mhm.
Count them later.
Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Expenditures? Okay. So this first slide is just showing you a comparison between fiscal year '23 and fiscal year '24 as a breakout of total operating expenditures versus what we use to fund the capital and enterprise solutions replacement funds. And so the proposed budget again includes an additional almost $5.7 million to fund the capital replacement funds. Again, as I mentioned, it's based on that inflationary factor that we're seeing in the public safety vehicles, specifically fire apparatuses. We're seeing those go up about 15% with lead times that used to be 18 months to now 40 months. So that is what we're building in here. We also had ES look at what's inflation doing to the things that are in their replacement fund. And we also looked at were we missing anything in theirs, and we decided to add the security cameras because those need to be replaced, so those are being added. So we feel like now it's where it needs to be. It also shows that the operations portion, again, of expenditures has went up 6.77%, and we'll talk again more about that. This next slide can be found on page 14 of your packet. And it's the pie chart. So there's two pie charts. One shows expenditures, and I'm going to be focusing. One shows a comparison of expenditures. The top is by function between fiscal year 22 and 23 and 24. So public safety versus culture and rec. The one below shows expenditures by classification, and that's the one I'm going to focus on, and that's the one that is being compared on the screen. So it's showing you by classification. First, the salary and benefits in the proposed fiscal year 24 budget are 5% higher than the fiscal 3 adopted. Included in the budget is a 3.5% increase in salaries for all employees. So employees, general employees, as well as public safety employees, we'll see a 3.5, or we're proposing a 3.5% increase for them. In addition, this proposed budget includes 2 additional positions that are based on council feedback. And those positions are, one is for the Community Information Services Division, so to help with communications, it's a communication specialist. And then the other is the Village Concept Coordinator that we heard was needed. Next, supplies. Supplies is increasing about 30%, and that really is the result of some medical supplies. So fire was trying to budget as a just-in-time, but based on lead times for medical supplies, they've needed to kind of tweak that a little bit, so they've increased their budget for medical supplies. Supplies also include some uniforms for the fire department. There's an increase in communications equipment, and that's for emergency management is asking to replace some public safety radio equipment that has been in service for 10 years and it's just reached its useful life. There's also the BEC is asking for some furniture for down there. It's time to replace the furniture down there. We're also seeing we're doing some of the camera refresh. Police is asked to replace an aging evidence locker with a refrigeration just so that they can store the DNA and DWI blood testing. And then fire has asked to replace some thermal imaging cameras. And so that is primarily the reason for the 30% increase. It's about $530,000. Next is maintenance. And maintenance is increasing about 13%, or about $437,000, and that really is related to some computer video maintenance that's being done. And then, if you recall, we moved the we reduced the parks operations by 5 employees, and we entered, council approved a contract for the median and landscape maintenance. And so that is reflecting that contract now in the budget. Okay, so that's why that's going up. And then services is the next area, and services is increasing 12% or about $1.4 million. And this is really where you're going to see the direction that's been provided by council. So other services, or this line is going up for community development, 1 million of it. So 1 million of the 1.4 is related to the food truck park operations. And then there's another 50,000 that's related to retail attraction consultant. And then we also have community experience added 25,000 for the Celebrate Coppell celebration. Streets added 150,000 for brine storage, and that was presented during the town hall. And then we've added employee experience added for a culture of belonging. And they're also going to start doing an annual compensation study, so they'll be looking at 1/3 of the employee base each year over the next 3 years, rather than waiting and doing it every 3 years. They'll just do 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, so that it's completed, and we have just better information. So they'll be looking at what do we need to look at, what are they seeing in the market, are people leaving, and basing that study on that. And so that is for your services. And then the last, I kind of grouped transfers and capital together, and that went down 34%. And that really is because we budgeted about 12 million last year to fully fund, and we're requesting about 6 more million to fully fund those. And then on page 15 lists out all of the capital items that are requested, and that adds up to about $878, almost $879,000 for capital items that are being requested. I'm happy if you have any questions on any of those, I'm happy to answer those.
Don? Kim, Don has a question.
You, make sure I'm following just where things are, like combined services, I'm looking just looking at the actual P&L, like by function.
Okay.
Combined services under general government,
Mm-hmm.
is that where the transfer over
Yes.
to the, okay, so that's why that number is dramatically different
Yes.
between before and after and going back down, so.
Correct.
Okay. So the difference really is between last year's budget and this year's budget, a little under $5 million, $4.5 million net of the capital replacement fund, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, last
All right.
year, so last year we budgeted 13.8, and it was about 12 million, I think, 11 or 12. And then this year it's 8.3, and over 6 million of that is for replacement.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Anything else?
Any other questions?
No? Okay. So next we will move on to the general fund fund balance walk forward, and that is on page 16 of your handout. And it's a portion of that is replicated on the slide. So I'm going to walk through what's in your packet, because I want to start at the top. Because this can be kind of confusing, I think. So it starts out with the $133 million is the fund balance at the beginning of the year. Okay, so that's cumulative revenues and revenues minus expenditures since the city's been here, right? So that's the cumulative. So we're starting there. we're adding to that the revenues for fiscal year 23 amended. Then we're subtracting the amended fiscal year 23 expenditures to come up with what do we think our fund balance is going to be at 9/30/2023. We're taking that number and we're going to add the budgeted proposed revenues for fiscal year 24, and we're going to back out the budgeted expenditures for proposed expenditures for 24 to come up with where do we think fund balance will be at 9/30/2024. And then now we're going to move to what's on the screen and the lower part. So the lower part is just basically showing you how is that 122 million being allocated, right? Because council has provided some direction to us and the charter provides us direction. So we have $122 million fund balance, and that is 10% of that is charter restricted. So we're taking, and it would be 10% of the fiscal year 24 budgeted revenues. But what I did is I only took the operating part. So I know that budgeted expenditures are 75 million, but of that only about 69 million is really operations. The difference is fully funding the replacement funds. So that's 10%, that's charter restricted. It's required to sit there. Then the next section is committed, and those are policies that have been provided to staff by previous councils. So one of the policies is that we will commit 15% of fund balance. So again, I'm using the 69, the operations portion, and so that gets you the 10 million. And then the other three areas, the allocated for economic development, allocated for revenue threats, and allocated for projects, that's another policy. And basically what that was is council said, after the audit has been presented and we know how much our revenues exceed our expenditures, let's look at, do we want to allocate some of that excess to these three areas? And so that's what that plan is. And again, those are previous councils gave us that direction to set that aside. So then you get into the assigned, and what we've done with the assigned is that's typically something that we know needs to be done. We just don't know what budget year it's going to be done in. So we know that we need to set aside some money to accomplish some one-time project. So this isn't for operations, this is a one-time expenditure, something that's just a one-time cost and doesn't have a reoccurring piece to it. And so the first is CRDC maintenance, and that's the accumulation of those 35% transfers from CRDC, 35% of their sales tax each year. And what we do is we look at, and there's a formula that we look at, how much of that are we going to apply to reduce, basically reduce the expenditure. So we would reduce this number to help grow your undesignated. The next is we know that the building code and zoning update needs to be done. We know that there's an economic development program. And then the next two are similar, I would say, to the capital replacement fund. We've identified some projects that need to be done. Some of them are in the 5-year forecast, some of them go out a little bit further. And so this is a way to kind of set aside money. And then as those projects come before you as a budget amendment or as part of the budget process, this number would go down. And so how you would see the first one, the IMF traffic and facilities projects, we currently budget a transfer to the IMF from general fund for streets, facilities, and traffic to maintain those things. If we wanted to increase that a little bit, we could then decrease this and increase our transfer, right? So that we're putting more in there to help maintain our infrastructure at the level the community has come to expect us to maintain it at, right? The other one is for trail projects, and so those are various trails that have been identified that we have set aside money for that could be done. You know, this is the next 5 years or even further out for this $30 million. The next area that you see is the strategic reserve, and it's 30 million. And so really what that is council's ability to address the rule change, should it go into effect, and there's things that you want to do, or any other type of threats that come up. You know, I mean, we had COVID at the same time that we found out about the rule change, and then we had SB2, and so it takes time to adjust, and this gives you the flexibility and allows you to be strategic in your adjustments. And then you'll notice that we, and we're going to talk about it more later, we made an adjustment to the undesignated, and so what this represents is 50% of the fiscal year 24 budgeted expenditures. Again, the operating portion, so the 69 million, not the 75 million. Do you have questions? That was a lot.
Anybody have any questions? Move on.
Okay. Okay. So this is the fun part, because it's your budget. So page 17, and it's really 17 through 19 is council's budget. I do first want to point out that this was prepared prior to your meeting last Thursday with the service orgs, so it does not reflect the actual amounts that you approved. This budget will actually go up when we adjust it for the amounts that you're giving the service orgs. It'll go up $16,721. So once the service orgs are updated, your budget will be about $46,000 less than the adopted 23 budget. So I can point out a few things. So the first page is really the summary, and then we have the detail in the back. Looking at this, your legislative travel, it decreased $20,000, and that's because it's not a legislative year. We also moved your dues and memberships went from $99,000 to $50,000, and that's just because we moved the amount that we're providing the chamber down to special projects. Rather than showing it as a dues and membership, it's a grant that you're giving them, so we're reflecting it in special projects. And then I think the other contingency funds, we reduced it from $50,000 to $25,000. Just kind of looking on, are you using that for anything? And then again, your special projects is going to end up being about $316,000. We can look at the detail if you'd like. For those, it's really, so it's going to be all the 6471 accounts. Do you have any questions on those?
What was the other services again?
And then the other services, that is Jennifer, who gives you your legislative update, so we pay her out of there. We also are paying the sales, you have the sales tax consultant that's paid out of other services, and then you have your the crisis communications and training individuals paid out of other services.
The sales tax consultant is the guy who goes through and figures out for them.
HMWK.
John Kroll, the sales tax consultants on the SFE side that you were talking about, Coppell. He's over there doing the audits, and if he identifies that someone's not paying correctly,
Right.
then he's paid out of that. So that's out of the finance
Okay.
side.
Okay.
This one is.
This is John Kroll. This is who we've been working with for a long time that watches out for us on sales tax legislation and
Right.
laws.
Kevin?
Hey, Kim, the contingency funds, I know you said that, make some adjustments on the actual 21, 22, we didn't spend anything. Historically, what has that fund been allocated for?
It's if y'all identify something that you want that we don't necessarily have budgeted, we go higher.
Cool. Okay. And so, but I guess previous councils or budgets just established it at about 50,000. I'm assuming we haven't been using it, and that's why we're reducing that?
To my knowledge, I don't recall the last time it was used.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't have a conversation going on.
Secret meeting.
Numbers.
Yeah, all the numbers. But because we haven't utilized it, is that why
We just adjusted
just
it down.
reduced it down? But it's budget, so.
It's your number. If you tell us to put it at 50, we'll put it at 50.
I was just curious as to what previous councils may have deployed that for. There you go. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any questions? Council Sergeant?
So we're not renting any space anymore?
So what that was, we were paying for rental for Theater Coppell, and council last year had them do a grant, and so now it's shown in special projects, because we're giving it to them and they'll pay the rental.
Okay, thank you.
That was one of the asks in the Arts Councils, or we talked about it during the Art Council thing the other night. So that's where that went to zero.
Okay, cool.
So next, we will discuss the debt service fund. And this is going to be on page 20 of your packet. So this fund's revenue source is the INS portion of the property tax rate, which is, we set that rate at the level needed to generate the revenue amount necessary to cover the principal and interest on the bond payments that will be due in fiscal year '24. That amount is $7,439,800. I know that the property tax number up there says $7,459,000, and that's because that is also including the $20,000 shown on your page 20 that is shows as property tax P&I. And what that is, principal and interest that we're expecting when we collect delinquent taxes. Okay? So I just want to point out, in case you looked at that. And then page 21 will show you the schedule of tax-supported debt. And so the current principal amount of bonds outstanding is $65,215,000. 68% of these bonds will be repaid in 2033. And then this slide also shows that we have bond principal of 7.2 and we have interest expense of about 3.3. Obviously that adds up to more than the 7 million that I just told you the property tax rate was set to cover. And if you recall last year, we moved the water sewer and the CRDC bonds that were certificate of obligations, and we show them the payment in this fund, but you also notice on your page 20 that there is a transfer in of $3,150,906. That is money coming from water sewer and CRDC to pay their portion of principal and interest on the COs issued to do water sewer and CRDC projects. Okay? I think that is all I have on debt service. Do you have any questions?
You made a comment that, I don't remember the number was, what was it, 80% would be paid down by 2033?
63%.
Is there a magic, is that 63% a magic measure or anything?
No, we just like to tell you how much is going. Oh, I said it, 68, I apologize. 68% by 2033. It's just what will be paid off in 10 years.
Okay.
Anything
Anybody
else?
have any other questions?
Okay. Then the next area that we're going to cover is a discussion regarding the fund balance policy. And the fund balance policy can be found on page 24, and it's page 24 through 26. And if you turn to page 25, there is a few lines that are highlighted in yellow. And as I mentioned when I was walking through the fund balance policy, I shared that we took that undesignated down to 50% of fiscal year 24 proposed budgeted expenditures. And what that represents is about 180 days worth of expenditures. And so we just kind of thinking about the policy and questions that we get, what should the undesignated be? Now we have a policy that says what our undesignated should be. So when we talk to the rating agencies, now we have something that we can say, this is our policy, this is what it is, and it represents 180 days, and so it just kind of solidifies it. Do you have any questions on that? Any comments, any concerns?
So I have a comment. Back several years ago, we went through a big evaluation from a risk standpoint of what we needed to do to keep our AAA bond rating. And one of the big questions was, what does that fund balance need to be? And the analyst didn't want to give us a firm fixed number. They admitted that our $30 million that we had been running was good, and so we naturally asked them what was better, and they said, well, more. And I think what Kim is proposing is that we have a number, by definition, and that will probably go a long ways to establishing the solidity of our finance from the way that they evaluate it. So I see the fact that we're putting a number down as a goal, or not a goal, we will achieve it, is a very good way to communicate with those agencies. So I like the approach.
And then, okay.
I also like the approach. I'm trying to think through, how does it not become policy then? If we're saying it's undesignated, unreserved, but how is it different from some of those policy-driven requirements up higher in the fund balance, the ones that are, because now we have it stated in here.
And that those are stated in here also.
Well, but I'm
your
saying that
policy.
undesignated, what if we actually needed, how is it different than those things in the upper, you see what I'm saying? I mean, we have, economic development and, the 3 or 4 things that are required.
Mm-hmm.
But then now we have another requirement of 50%, this 50%. So isn't it just another policy requirement? I mean, if we needed to spend the money, would we have to just change it? Or the word here is target. The word here is target. Is that legit, that it's really just a target?
It's a target for budgeting purposes, to your point. These guidelines, with the exception of the charter, is all malleable.
Okay.
Your 15%, at any point in time, you
We
can
could change
decide
that.
you don't need 15%.
Okay.
This is for your, from a policy setting board.
And if we had a natural disaster come across and we had to use some of that fund, I think everyone would be more than welcome to say, well, it's okay if we violate the 50% this year. That's not a...
So that 50% is basically like those upper buckets that we have. I mean, it's basically a fifth bucket now.
And if you look at page 26, you have item 7 is replenishment. So it's the fund balance, it can fall below those target levels, and you have a couple of years to restore it.
Okay.
Right. So you have flexibility.
I see.
And you built it into your policy.
Okay. So you do have, there is a workout if something required us to actually dip into it.
Yeah.
And I do see one of the other questions I didn't ask a while ago, but the assigned fund balance, so Kim and Mike are the officials authorized to assign. That was my question was going to be who can assign those fund balances to go into those assigned buckets, but y'all can designate whatever needs to be put back for projects or whatever else, right? Okay.
Kevin?
I'm gonna just piggyback on what Don just brought up. So part of what you explained was in this target, this 50% target, is to help, I guess, shore up the AAA rating so you can go talk to those creditors. Well, if we do define that and we do make that part of our helping shore up our AAA rating, and it does drop below, that doesn't hurt us?
We don't believe so. I mean, Jason Hughes has talked to this council before, and you'll have an opportunity next summer probably, when we're talking about issuing some debt, to talk to him again. The background on this is prior to 2012, so you know, this may go to you, but prior to this, they did a rating meeting in which Jason happened to mention the $38 million. No one could ever explain it. Nobody could ever figure it out. Jason never could defend it. I'm not speaking negatively. Jason just said, oh, $38 million, that's a good number. And so as we've gone through ratings for the different bond agencies every time, that number's actually been up and down through time. It's moved in multiple directions. Mm-hmm. So we've never had a guide. And so when we got into this discussion about, well, let's give it some basis of decision making. Mm-hmm. That's the 50% coming up with 180 days. It just happens to work out that, in this case, 34 million. Next year, if the budget goes up a little bit, it could go up a little bit, and then we have to look at the above the line and see if there's any adjustments that have to be made there as well.
And my question really just revolved around the policy of if we define it as a target or whatever, and then, and I know you said it's malleable, and I understand all that, but by defining it, and then we drop below it due to natural disaster or whatever, and then the credit agencies ask about that, and they say, well, you have it defined as a target. I'm just curious if that hurts us. Because
I can't speak for Moody's and S&P.
Yeah.
To even have a negative discussion, considering the financial condition that we're in and the flexibility and agility we have, is very difficult.
Well, and understanding all that, yes.
So whoever's in this chair and whatever that happens, and they're going to look, again, I want to say above the line, and they're going to be able to say, look, your strategic reserves. Mm-hmm. That's just as much a flexible number based on the undesignated unreserved number, because if this changes to 36, then I would say your strategic reserve would then say 28.
Are we going to have a new undesignated reserve? No, I'm just...
And that was a little bit of my point, is like, that number almost goes up here with these other policy numbers, is I thought. Because now, because now the flexible number is that strategic reserve or some of these assigned things rather than this 34 million. That's the one that's... Being
that you're a banker, I'll agree with you on one side, but on the other side, from governmental accounting, that number is unrestricted by definition, by what we have to use for definition.
Yeah, okay.
It's really just to be able for us to tell the rating agencies.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Our target is to, and if you want us to change, you know, the wording, I mean, to targeted undesignated fund balance of 50%, I mean, it's really just so that we can say to them, we have this is council's goals, this is the organization's goals to have a 50%.
Yeah.
And we have a plan if it falls below, and we can reevaluate it every, I mean, we should talk about the policy every year during this time, so.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that's in there. It's good to review that, be familiar with that, what the policy is.
Jim?
I want to kind of bounce off something Kevin said. So I think it would seem to me, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that if we didn't have that sum set aside for like a black swan event, natural disaster like that, and we got hit with the disaster, we'd have the obligation to respond to that regardless, right? Whether we had the fund or not. So we would end up borrowing money at higher rates in an emergency or something. So I would think that would hurt us worse, you know, than actually using the fund for something that the rating agencies would see was, you know, why we had the fund. And it would leave us, you know, so we wouldn't be left after the disaster in dire straits. So I actually think in that sense, if you think about, well, what if we hit the same natural disaster without the fund? You know, it's obviously a much worse situation. And then the other question I had was, when it says if restoration cannot be accomplished within such period without severe hardship, aren't we the body that would determine what constitutes severe hardship?
Yes, you are.
So, you know, then if we would look at all these same numbers and all the, you know, the same revenues and expenditures we would have in the same budget cycle and say, well, we're not going to be able to restore that fully this year. We can restore 50% of it. So let's do that. And to do otherwise would constitute a severe hardship. Then if we're the body that determines what constitutes severe hardship, then I think we have the flexibility we need to be able to address a bad situation without putting ourselves over a barrel, and at the same time, you know, showing some really good diligence for financial diligence for the rating agencies. That's the way I would look at it.
Any other comments, questions?
I want to make sure that you notice there's also two other highlights on page 26, and that's just, you know, we didn't have a hotel occupancy tax fund included in the fund balance policy. There really wasn't any revenue, right? So, but now that there is revenue and you're using it, we think you need to have a policy. And then the drainage utility district, that's another one, right? You adopted a master fee schedule for that, and projects. And so we think that you need to now have a fund balance policy for it also. So, and those, it's just consistent with the other special revenue funds.
Mayor, you know this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was actually going to ask if that 25% was a magic number, or if it was just kind of an already established number
So I'm
for those.
conservative, and all the research that I did was anywhere from 10% to 25%, so I'm going to lean to the 25%.
Errors from 25.
Our other funds use 25%.
Yeah.
And they do.
So it's consistent with other policies.
Makes sense to me.
Are there any other questions on the fund balance policy? Okay, if there's not.
Well, just real quick, is there anything about these other two funds, the HOT and the DUD, that in terms of how we use the funds that would make a 25% retention different from the others?
So Coppell Recreation Development Corp has people in it. HOT has a couple of people in it, so they're both consistent with 25%. Drainage Utility has somebody, you know, we're paying people. That's where I would go, is because those are reoccurring costs,
Right.
and if something happens.
And usually the bigger ones that, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So if there's nothing else there, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to talk to you about the initial proposed budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. If you can turn to your initial proposed budget. So in front of you, you have your initial proposed budget for fiscal year 24. Each year, the City of Coppell is required by law, by Local Government Code 102, to publish a proposed budget prior to the 30th day before the City Council approves the tax rate. Beginning with fiscal year 2021, Senate Bill 2 imposed an earlier condensed schedule for budget and tax rate purposes. The initial proposed budget is a legal requirement. This document is created before receiving certified values, which we will receive on July 25th, as covered by Kim earlier. These conflicting deadlines cause staff to publish a proposed budget with estimates. The initial proposed budget and the estimated tax rate are not what council will take action on August the 22nd meeting. This draft is published exclusively to meet the city's legal obligations. And so a full-length proposed budget will be available for public review and to you by the August 5th charter deadline. And at this time, I can take any questions.
Oh, Jim.
Yeah, that's all right. I didn't want to interrupt you. So Kim had alluded earlier to the new property that we were adding to the rolls. So is the 561, 535, right at or close to what we expect at least the new property will be?
So, it is based on some information that I got on new properties, but it's not final.
Mhm.
So it is based on what they're showing for new properties.
Okay.
Um,
How does that relate to years like
So,
recent years past? I know we've been slowly building out.
I have a spreadsheet, evaluation spreadsheet.
I presume that it's trending downward year to year?
Actually, I think this one was a little bit higher because we have a hotel, and you have Victory Park, the Victory Park area, and then, oh, those haven't come in yet. Blackberry, it's Blackberry Farms.
Okay, wow. But then it'll probably, when those do come online, then they'll be reflected as well.
Right, so you still have, you know, I don't know, they keep finding more and more. You think where it builds out, right?
Yeah, that's quite the compliment to this community.
So I'll tell you what right now they're looking at about 15 million for residential new construction, 96 million for commercial. And then the 10,000 in business personal property, but business, I mean, they move it in and out. So
Right. Okay. Well, that's encouraging. Thank you.
And last year it was 10 million for residential and 40 million for commercial. But that was final values.
Right. All disclaimers
Everything I
applied,
given you is
yes.
preliminary.
I understand.
By the way, just a FYI, the tax rate of whatever we come up with in August is going to be the lowest rate we've had since the '84. So in '85 it was 56 cents per hundred, and in '84 it was 46. So we're now in a 40-year low. Okay, so I fudged my numbers a year or two.
We'll grant you that one.
Thank you. Kevin,
I want to ask a question about, I know that we had spoke about the village concept, adding the staff member for that. The other staff member was an information,
Community engagement information office.
community engagement
Marketing,
information office.
publications, video.
Excellent. And is that from the council retreat discussion that we had about trying to, is that feedback from that? Trying to make sure that we engage the citizens better, make sure that they know more about what's going on in the city and what's going on in their community. I'm assuming that's the effort on that, is just trying to get more engagement and more awareness as we discussed in that meeting?
Yes, all the above.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you for clarifying.
Absolutely.
So the next item is just a general discussion if there's any follow-up questions on anything we've covered tonight.
I just have one other follow-up on my question. Would that be in Hannah's team?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Follow-up to my follow-up?
No.
no. Brianna said no.
How many people are on Hannah's team right now currently?
She has JJ, and then a contract person.
Got it. Okay. That's why I see JJ a lot, because he's... Cool. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So no further discussion there.
Oh,
We are at
you're
the
turning
end.
it back over to us then.
I am.
So basically Kim's at the end of her presentation. Does anybody have anything you'd like to comment or talk about that we haven't covered? Don?
On the debt service, if we issue debt next year, or a year and a half or whatever, for Royal or whatever we decide, is this debt service coming down such that we would be able to slide in? Is that the plan, is that we would keep the debt service load somewhat flat
Right,
if
right.
we issue next.
That's why we're waiting until,
Okay.
if we issue in '24, the payment's due in '25, you see you get $1 million.
Yep.
Because it comes down, and then
Yeah.
there's some structuring we can do, and,
And they'll work
there's
with
some things
us.
that we can do to be strategic to help keep that INS portion of the rate stable.
Keep it flat, even
Yes.
though we issue new debt.
At the
Okay.
January retreat, that's when we go over the debt service model, and that's what we'll show you, and y'all will give us direction about, because that process takes a while. So you'll give us direction then, what y'all want to do with the INS side of the tax rate.
Okay, and then reimbursement money agreements or whatever, or
You can choose to include that in the debt, or just
Or
have
just
it
pay it.
paid as we've been
As
paid
we
to
go.
go.
And-
The amendment included transferring money to the CIP to cover some of,
Engineering.
right, that you approved that would cover it under the reimbursement
Then-
resolution. So we moved it out of the general fund, put it over there. If you decide you want to pay it back,
Yeah.
then we move it back. If you decide
And
you
how
want
long's
to
the-
reduce it, then we do.
The resolution's good until completion of the project? Is that when you have to decide whether to,
Issuance of the bonds.
so it can just sit out there indefinitely? Like if we were to pay cash up front and then decide to issue bonds later, is there, I thought there was
Oh,
some-
no,
I thought
it's,
you
it
had to do it by
has,
the
there's
end
some
of the contract.
terms around completion, the timing of the
Completion of
project,
the
yes.
project, by
Yeah,
that
no,
point, you have
there's-
to decide whether
Yeah.
you're gonna reimburse
Yeah.
yourself or not.
And,
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of what we've been talking about, knowing that we're not gonna be talking about the debt potentially for Royal till '24. We're talking about the timings, finishing up Freeport and going out to bid on Royal, using cash, pay for Royal to get it started, then you make that decision, and you could divvy it up half, 3/4 could be debt, and the rest could be cash.
Yeah.
It's anything that you'd like to do, but it doesn't prevent us from going forward because we do have the reimbursement resolution in place.
All right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, when we did that modeling exercise, I guess last year, whenever that was, so 24 was that kind of like slight rise, and then on the debt side, and then it started to go down, is that right? I was trying to think about like.
The only thing I recall about it was that we talked about having the first debt payment in '25.
Okay,
Now, whether or not there was a little bit of a bump or not, I don't recall.
yeah, I was just, you know me, I'm a visual person, so.
last year, the principal and interest, I think, was 7,470,
Hmm.
I think. And so now it's 74. I mean, it only dropped a little. It's 7,439.
That was when we were modeling when to bring
When to bring
Royal
that
online,
online.
and that created the, yeah.
We bumped
okay.
it out to 25 to keep the bump from happening.
That's
in
exactly,
24.
yes, that's exactly right. Thank you.
Because we get a big drop next year.
Yes.
And
And again, you have options.
Strategic.
Strategic designated, undesignated.
Spend 7.47. I apologize.
We could send you extras. More flexibility, more agility.
One more thing, the capital reserve, I know we've had to increase, I said it wrong, capital replacement reserve. I know we're adding more to it now for inflationary reasons, and I'm assuming maybe it's growth within the assets or something, but do we anticipate we'll always have to be pushing additional dollars over there? Do we really think this is sort of making us whole on that?
We really hope that this is making us whole.
And then going forward, it would be just the normal ongoing replacement?
Right. It's the 1 year useful life going forward.
Yep.
And if you're purchasing anything, like if there's something new that's not in there, then we would be funding that,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Because there could be
So there's always gonna be some
potentially.
growth and everything, but this really ought to get us whole
Correct.
based on what we have today and where we think prices are really gonna settle. Okay. Thanks.
For the next 5 years.
Okay.
Brianna?
Mike, I have a random question. You and I have talked about cybersecurity, ransomware attacks, the fact that it's
Out there?
out there, right? And knowing that when that happens unexpectedly, there's a huge expense involved in it. Where are we, where would that type of expenditure fit into this? And are we doing anything to allocate just in case, knowing that like City of Dallas was hit and we know that the possibility always exists?
I'm looking at those two because they had the visits with Jared. directly.
Okay.
So from the perspective, do we budget in the ES budget for a contingency around response to an attack? No.
Okay.
If we were to have something like that happen, and be on a scale that we would be looking at probably coming back to the council, those are the emergency situations that we would be coming back to have a conversation with y'all to explain what we've got and then get direction on expending some of that undesignated fund balance or contingency that's in the combined services to address that threat. Now, Jared has cybersecurity and all of the things that are required from a security standpoint, from infrastructure and software. Those costs are included in his budget, but from a response, do we budget money to respond to?
Yeah,
it?
from a response
We did not.
standpoint, right? Okay. Thank you.
Bijou?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, do we have can we purchase any insurance?
Fascinating that you asked that question. Texas Municipal Risk Pool is creating a cybersecurity fund. That's how it works yet, I'm still learning, and I will learn more actually starting on Thursday. But that's who we would use. So they've recognized it because cities have been hit, and that's who we would purchase it to.
Would that be something that we would purchase on the side, or would it come through our normal membership with them?
The risk pool is the part of the risk pool's fee.
I remember they doing a presentation at the TML conference.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw that. And I was just asking because like we went through that and we're currently in a situation where we're having to cut G&A in order to pay for the unexpected. Right, so
But-
just thinking through that.
Are there any third parties in addition to TML is offering insurance?
I'm not aware of it.
There
I
are, but they don't know
haven't-
what they're doing.
I-
So TML would be the best route to go, only because I've done research in this space.
Can't imagine how they would define setting a rate, because you don't know what your risk is going to be.
That's absolutely right.
I mean, it's like an open book.
Absolutely.
It must be in the infancy, because I believe I've heard something in my industry about offering that type of thing, but it's probably in the infancy about like how do you.
It's very, 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 yeah,
how do
it's
you
very new.
Determine
and-
premiums
right.
and payouts,
understanding who the right
exclusions and
players.
everything else, right?
Yeah, I seen people offering, okay, if the ransom is 1 million, here is the rate. If it's 2 million, here is the rate. I seen that.
And from a government transparency, we'd have to at least have it in our budget how much we were guaranteed or insured for, so then someone would come in.
Target.
Yeah. That would be,
Yeah.
Like,
That's
you're in
happened
this city,
before.
we're gonna ask for
The Heisman
1 million.
Trophy. 1 million?
Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Evil's only up for ransom, yeah.
At least on a risk pool, like a TML type risk pool, they could underwrite it based on like number of devices. So we would only be like paying a proportionate share, at least based on some criteria, right? I mean, if you just go into the market,
Well,
like
as
London
I-
or something,
as
and
I've
buy a
been-
policy, you're,
Actually, it's interesting you say that because that's one of the paragraphs in the write-up is talking about devices, because that's part of your exposure, right?
Right.
Every one of those is devices, whether it's your phone or laptop or computer, is a potential risk.
Council turn them all in.
But we would-
Self help.
we would have, in relation like to the city of Dallas, the number of devices we would have would be so
It's much smaller,
minuscule.
right.
So we would probably end up paying a much smaller share. So it actually makes more sense to do something like that, I think, than to go into the market. But that's just me.
Bijou, you said that you heard that at a previous TML, or did you see it in this
It's coming
coming
up
up?
in Dallas.
No, I thought it was last one.
Last TML we attended, there was a presentation. Yeah, I got the card and I sent that information to, I think, Tim.
I'll look for it this year then.
They're not coming.
I'm sure they
It'll be at every conference for a long time.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the reason is they're already cities hit with this, before Dallas, so that's.
Yeah, yeah.
If you remember, Carrollton was a few years ago.
DCAT clearly got taken down.
All right, anybody have anything else for the good of the community? Seeing nothing, seeing no takers, we're going to move on to item number 11, which is our second citizens appearance. We have no one signed up to speak, so therefore, it being 7:20 p.m. and there being no further business before this body, we are adjourned.
Wow.